Hey, Goose, you big stud. That's me, honey. Take me to bed or lose me forever. Show me the way home, honey. I'm Liam, this is Rob, and welcome to the Hey You Guys podcast with Top Gun Maverick absolutely killing it at the multiplexes. Now seemed a good time as any to revisit the iconic original and put Rob's legendary hatred for Tom Cruise to the test because, mate, how can you can't hate Tom Cruise in Top Gun. Surely not. One of the most iconic movie characters of all time. I mean, he is aged like a fine wine in this film.
So, all right, first of all, of all the quotes you could have chosen for this film, bravo for picking the randomest quotes.
Honestly, I think it's my favorite scene in the movie. Yeah. The absolutely bananas diner scene. Yeah. The sex-positive wife, the traumatized child. Because he's like, literally, he's just talking about, like, listen, you need to take me home and give me a good old-fashioned Rogerin. Right in front of their kid. I assume that kid turns into Miles Teller in Maverick. As well, that's kind of explains a lot, I suppose. But yes, very bizarre scene. One of many bizarre scenes in a very bizarre movie.
No, Tom Cruise in Top Gun is not my most hated of Tom Cruise films. In regards to it's just weird. This entire film, there's a lot of this film that is just completely weird. Like,
it really is. Yeah,
the fact that they have this flight school, this magic flight school, it's the best of the best. But they don't really teach them anything from what I can tell in the film. They go up against who as the bad guys?
Nobody knows. It's implied that it's the Russians purely because they're fighting against MiGs.
Yeah.
But it's never built in. Obviously, this is 1986. So, maybe they don't need to explain because everyone's like, well, it has to be the Russians because it's the midst of the Cold War. Well, unless we take into consideration that Rocky, kind of put an end to that at the end of
Rocky fixed the Cold War.
Of course, yeah. Well, it's still fresh in the memory, if nothing else. But yeah, it's a bizarre one because there's no bad guy. There's no real narrative to this film. It's essentially like a collection of vignettes. It's like there's just enough plot in this movie to link together a collection of like set pieces and songs for the most part. Yeah. It's not far from like avant-garde filmmaking, but just with the gloss of an 80s action movie. Sorry.
We won't get to it in that section, but this film is all about soundtrack. The soundtrack is fucking fantastic in this film.
Oh, it's one of the best. Yeah. It is one of the best.
It is really, really insane. But on my fifth, I've only seen this film a handful of times. I think I'm counting 5 times, I believe. Never noticed. We did Near Dark a couple of weeks ago. Adrian Pasdar, probably a few months ago now. Adrian Pasdar's in this film. Doesn't say a fucking word, but he is in this film. Like that, to me, that's weird.
Well, like you said, it's hard to kind of pin down this movie, and I haven't seen Maverick yet, the legacy sequel, whatever you want to call it.
I was going to link a couple of things to Maverick, so I'll keep my mouth shut on that then.
Oh, no, it's absolutely fine. Like, spoil away. But for the most part, I understand that movie, like the first half is almost like a love letter to this film. And then the second half is basically Mission Impossible in the sky. And I think that's probably the right way to go around things, because you can't just remake this. Like I said, you could, but there's no real plot. There's I guess the bad guys, like you say, are maybe the Russians, but in terms of, and from a narrative perspective, like, who is the bad guy? Iceman? Like, he's not particularly bad.
Iceman is the bad guy, right? I noticed this on the watching I did for this podcast. Why is everyone blaming Maverick for Goose's death? I'm going straight to the middle of the film now. Everyone's blaming Maverick for Goose's death, where it's Iceman's fault. He did not want Maverick to overtake him in the leaderboard, which is why they're hunting Jester. So he, at the last minute, decides to move to the point where Maverick is already too close to him to get out of his jet wash. So Iceman just doesn't want to lose points and have Maverick beat him. So it's his fault, because he was so determined to take Jester out and couldn't do it, that he caused the jet wash that Maverick was in. Nobody blamed Iceman. Iceman is the fucking Daniel LaRusso of this fucking film.
Maybe he is, but the thing is, I'm not sure if I buy him as a bad guy. Yeah, he's made an error there. And that is like the big cornerstone of this movie. Like, you think, like, in any other film, it would be Maverick's fault. Like, his name is Maverick. It feels like it's set up for this. He's going to make a Maverick maneuver, and it's going to lead to the death of his friend. But that's not the case. No. It is legitimately, like you said, if you're going to force it upon someone, I totally agree with you. I would go with Iceman over Maverick. But the reality is, it's not really anyone's fault. And that is one of the bizarre things of this film. Like you said, they go to flight school and they don't learn anything. There's a death in the film, which is just a kind of accident. There are bad guys, but they're never explained. Iceman is supposedly, I guess, the quote-unquote kind of bad guy of this film. But all he does, like you said, is play by the rules. Like, that is that's his big thing. It's like, Maverick, the fact that he's called Maverick is so ridiculous for a start. It's like everyone constantly in the film describing him as a Maverick, but without saying Maverick, because it's already his name. It's like, oh, well, he plays by his own rules. He flies by the seat of his pants. He won't adhere to the rules. Imagine somebody who does things by the book then. Imagine the exact opposite. Yeah, that's this guy. They should have called Iceman plays by the rules guy. Yeah. It's a ridiculous setup for this film.
Was it, you're dangerous, I don't like you. Like, you're a maverick.
Everything people are saying to him is like, well, we can't just say he's a maverick because his name is fucking Maverick. It's like everyone's gone to the internet. It's like, all right, how many synonyms are there for Maverick? It's an absolutely ridiculous setup.
This film was all right. This is one of the only films where you're watching it and you can smell, like, just... It's the sweatiest film I have ever seen.
So
like,
sweaty.
You can just smell it. Like, obviously the volleyball scene, but, oh, my God, I don't think I'd ever want to be in a control room with... what's his name from Masters of the Universe?
James Tolkien.
James Tolkien, yeah.
Yeah.
Ludwig.
Ludwig, yeah. Ludwig. Well, I was actually thinking when I was watching this film, I was like, is there like a James Tolkien multiverse going on here? Because ostensibly he's like playing the same character over and over again in a bunch of films. And eventually I'm going, is this kind of like a quantum leap situation where he keeps going to different timelines, different films, but instead of like, that character, Quantum Leap, it's usually like, well, I'll pretend to be a woman and play the part. But he's like, no, I'm just going to be me in every single universe, regardless of the role. Like, it is, you could just lift him directly from Back to the Future, directly from Masters of the Universe, plonk him in this film. It's the exact same character. Nothing changes.
He must just get hired. Just be you.
Just be you. Yeah. You know that? You in like the last 8 films, we're going to need a bit more of that. But sorry, to get back to your point, it's outrageously sweaty. Like, no. It's weird because I don't think I've ever watched this movie before. Like, I was going into it and I was like, I'm sure it's one of those bizarre ones where I've seen it all, but I've seen it in bits. I'm not convinced I've ever sat down and watched the movie from start to finish until like legitimately last week. And 2 things jumped out at me. One was the sweatiness. And 2 was the oversaturation of color to the point where I thought there was a problem with the recording. Because I was watching it on Sky Movies. Yeah. And I was like, is this like something to do with like the HD transfer or something about the way that Sky have got it set up? And I realized I had a recording of it from Film 4. And I went out of my way to stop it and put it on Film 4 because I'm like, it can't be this saturated. The colors can't be turned up that high. That's exactly what they are. That's exactly. It's quite an aggressive looking movie in many respects, and it only adds to the sweatiness. Imagine if The Rock was in this movie. He'd just be a puddle. It's so ridiculous.
Like, I understand you're going to be locked in that war room and like it's war, so no unauthorized personnel in, and you're on the middle of a ship. But fucking hell, it's meant to be state of the art. Air conditioning, open a window, do something.
Well, I love like when things are supposed to be state of the art in the 80s. And one of the things, of course, you have to do is have mid 80s computer screens, and everything just looks like asteroids. Yeah. It's like they're pointing the screen like this is cutting edge stuff. I'm like, man, that looks so budget. Like nothing ages this movie quite like a computer screen. Because for the most part, while it might be the most iconic slice of Americana ever committed to screen, I really think that might be the case. Yeah. It just screams America, everything about it. That always takes me out of it. Like, it does have that 80s aspect, but for the most part, everything else is aged beautifully. Like Tom Cruise's look, like there's a reason he's dressed exactly, he looks exactly the same in Maverick. Not only because he's like got that kind of the vampire blood where he just doesn't seem to age, but like the haircut's basically the same. The aviator glasses still look dope. The coat the same. Like the white t-shirt and blue jeans is just a classic look. Yeah. The only thing I would say, the negative I'd say about Tom Cruise in this movie is that it looks like he's still getting used to his new teeth. it's like it feels like somebody's just put those in his mouth, and he's still like, I'm not sure about it. Were my teeth always this big? Is the middle one supposed to be like bang in the? I'm not quite sure what's going on here. But other than the teeth, I think it's something of a timeless look.
After this recording, right, go on to IMDb and go onto the Top Gun IMDb page, and it gives you thumbnails of the cast, but the thumbnails are the pictures of now.
Oh yeah, well, you want to see how normal humans age versus how Tom Cruise
ages. It's fucking insane.
Yeah. It's like I've seen a few things online which are very harsh on Kelly McGinnis because she's had the audacity to age like a normal human being. You know, she's nearly 60 years old as well, and you know she looks like a woman who's in her mid-50s, which is completely reasonable because that's her fucking age.
I do want to know what cult Tom Cruise, Paul Rudd, and Keanu Reeves have joined.
You do know which cult Tom Cruise has joined.
I know, yeah. But, I mean, Paul Rudd and...
well, maybe they're Scientologists too. They just haven't made it as public.
Do we really want big Scientology to come down and start attacking our podcast?
Well, I don't know how would we feel about that? Like, of all the people, like one of the most beloved actors, and I don't want to hear that you don't like Paul Rudd. I'm not sure my heart could handle that. Of course. Thank God for that. You know, we're not kind of shy of a hot take on this podcast, and I thought that would be the hottest of all hot takes if you didn't like Paul Rudd. But imagine if he came out as a Scientologist. It's like, man, that would test the water, because that's one of the things with Tom Cruise. And I actually stopped the movie and asked my wife about this. There it is. I mentioned the wife. Is obviously in the mid-'80s, Tom Cruise was something of a sex symbol. And you watch this film, and objectively, you know, beyond the teeth and stuff, like he's a handsome guy. There's no two ways about it. He might not be your cup of tea, whatever, but he is objectively a good-looking boy in the mid-'80s. And like I said, with the flight suit and everything, he's really ticking all the boxes. But the problem is now, because of everything that happened with the Scientology and stuff, it's like, is he viewed as a sexual being anymore? Like, can he be viewed as this kind of like, and I think that's gone. Like, we've mentioned on the podcast before, for completely different reasons, that I don't think The Rock is ever seen as like a sexual, certainly not on screen. I'm sure someone would be like, they would love to fucking, like, I get it. But you see it on screen now. He's never really sold as a sexual human being. He's just The Rock. And I feel like that's happened with Tom Cruise. Like, nobody buys him as like a real human being
to the
anymore.
Point, right, where I have seen Top Gun Maverick. To the point where in that film, and no spoilers, but he does actually have a love scene.
Oh, an actual love scene?
Sort of, yeah.
With what's the name from Labyrinth?
Yeah,
Oh, what's the name? That's gonna derail the podcast right now. That's ridiculous, because I was literally, and this sounds really pervy, but I was looking at a picture of her from a few days ago. It was a picture of her from an award ceremony from 2000, and my goodness, what a striking lady she is.
She is. She's Jennifer Connelly.
How the hell did we forget Jennifer Connelly? That's ridiculous. Yeah. Such a big part of my childhood as well. Like, you know, Labyrinth all the way through to now. She's absolutely gorgeous.
So to the point where you're watching that, and I'm watching that, and I'm going, look, I don't like Tom Cruise, but I have seen lots of Tom Cruise films, and I haven't seen him actually do that since Eyes Wide Shut.
Oh yeah, and that was like a real filth fest, wasn't it? But again, that was all before the. You know, there's very much two eras of Tom Cruise. There's before the couch and there's after the couch. There's just no two ways about it. I know, you know, obviously there was everything Scientology surrounding that, but that was the kind of the, you know, ground zero for everything Scientology, and people's perception of Tom Cruise subsequently. I suppose.
The way I see him, the perception of him, he's probably now kind of like the black sheep uncle, the one that did something wrong at a family event, and he has to still be invited, and people have to put up with him. But outside of those family events, you don't want anything to do with him.
Well, it's weird though, isn't it? Because imagine the same analogy. Yeah, you've got this uncle who's like done something pretty suspect in the past, so you're like, oh, we can't.
We're not going as far as Uncle Touchy.
No. We're just saying, like, he's just got a slightly questionable past. He's done well, you know. We'll just say that the jumping on the couch thing, and you love Scientology, and you're like, oh, you know, Uncle Tom's a bit weird, Uncle Tom. But then he shows up to the parties, and every single party, he's just fucking killing it. Like, you know, you're just like, listen, man, I know we're not supposed to like Uncle Tom, but fucking Uncle Tom is cool as shit. It's like, look at that motorbike he rocked up, and he's got the aviators. He keeps just doing random stunts for no apparent reason. He's totally badass. And his sense of positivity, and like, I know it's a Scientology, but it's quite catchy. I was thinking about joining myself. But I'm convinced that if I was put in a room with Tom Cruise for 30 minutes, I would come out a Scientologist. Like, his just positivity for life and just what he's achieved, eventually I'd be like, all right, man, I got to give this a bash. There's got to be something to it, man.
I'm convinced if I'm put in a room with Tom Cruise for 30 minutes, it becomes Thunderdome.
It becomes like, you would absolutely, I don't care how many stunts he's done, I don't care how much kung fu he's done, you're gonna absolutely destroy Tom Cruise, dude. I mean, there's just no two ways about it. It's like that great scene in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood with Brad Pitt and Bruce Lee.
Bruce Lee, yeah.
When he's talking about George Foreman, he's like, dude, you wouldn't be like a fly to George Foreman. And he's completely correct. I don't care how good at kung fu, martial arts, whatever Bruce Lee is. He's just in a different weight class. Yeah. George Foreman would have absolutely annihilated him. Like, that's just like, he legitimately would be unable to hurt him. He's just too big a human being. And I suspect that would be very much the case with Tom Cruise and you. Just, he can throw punches you all day. It's like, dude, you're just going to swat him. But that's not,
Can I ask as well, going back to this film, did you think it was a little bit, I don't even know how to explain it. All the celebrations that they have and the amount of people that they have on the flight deck.
There are a lot of people on the flight deck.
There's planes coming in and out, and you're all just happy to just stand on the flight deck. Just
the thing is, I have to believe there's a sense of reality to that because, obviously, I think the military ended up like kind of half funding this film, and I totally understand why, because it is nothing if not an advertising campaign to join in the US military.
Especially loads of people joined the Navy after.
Oh yeah, like if you weren't buying a pair of aviators, you were joining the Navy or whatever, or the Air Force after this. 100%. Like I can especially in the the midst of the 80s and the Cold War and stuff.
Only two choices. I can't afford a pair of aviators, so I'm joining the Navy instead.
Yeah, I'm joining the Navy so I can get enough money to buy the aviator. Or maybe if I join the Navy or the Air Force, they'll just give me the aviators. Maybe that's how that works. But like, while there are a lot of people on that deck, and I couldn't quite. I think I was distracted by the cover scheme of this film, which obviously we'll get to. Tony Scott and his array of visual tropes later on. But one of the reasons this film has aged so well is because it is all physical effects again. We've mentioned it so many times, and it's one of the reasons I think a lot of people are going to see Top Gun Maverick now. And there's, even in 2022, there's still that difference. You can still, that identifiable difference between it happening on screen and it being done in a computer. And I still think people can absolutely tell. And when you watch this film, and it helps no ends that, it's not just Tom Cruise's look, which is aged like a fine wine. It's the F-14s. The F-14s are the Ferrari Testarosas of the sky. They just look amazing. And it's kind of like, I'm sure if you got into one, it would look old, because I went to see the Concorde. There's one not far from me in East Lothian up in Scotland. Yeah. And when you go into the hangar and you see a Concorde, it legitimately still, like an F-14, it looks like a plane from the future. Like the jets at the back, they're like rectangular rather than round. And you're like, how the hell was this built in the 60s? And it's only when you get into the actual plane and you see the cockpit and everything is analog rather than digital. That's the only thing that gives it away, is going into the cockpit and there's no computers. But other than that, the Concorde still looks like a plane from the future. And the same is true of the F-14. I don't think there's a more iconic fighter jet, nearly 40 years later than the F-14. Well, it just looks the business.
To the point where they had to have an F-14 scene in Top Gun Maverick.
Yeah,
they had to bring it back. Yeah.
But yeah, it's.
How did you feel for Anthony Edwards' Goose in this film as well? You've got the iconic volleyball scene, right?
Mm-hmm.
You got Rick Rossovich as Slider, Val Kilmer as Iceman, Tom Cruise as Maverick, all with their shirts off. They're glistening. They've been sprayed down with baby oil.
So moist.
They are looking again a sweaty film. Yeah. Their hair hasn't moved an inch out of place, and then I'm guessing either the costume, casting director, maybe Tony Scott himself, said, "You know what, Anthony Edwards, you're not quite fitting the bill. Can you do me a favor? Can you put this tank top on instead?"
Yeah, it's a bit harsh, and as I said, it's one of those weird things with this film that it's seen largely because of the volleyball scene. The scene has been very homoerotic.
Yeah,
I'm not sure if that scene is particularly homoerotic. The only homoeroticism I take out of this film is the one-way relationship between Maverick and Goose. In so much that Maverick is clearly all about the ladies. Like, that opening sequence when he goes after Charlie, which we'll get to in a minute. I mean, that's some pretty rough stuff. But, he's clearly all about the ladies. Even though Goose has got this absolutely like drop dead, she might be a bit of a hillbilly based on the accent, but we're talking Meg Ryan in 1986 here, well above his kind of pay grade for sure.
Which completely shocked me again. I completely forgot Meg Ryan was in this film for all of 7.5 minutes.
Yeah, me too. I absolutely forgot. But I'm just not convinced. Like, he has that scene in the diner and he's playing the songs and it's like, his sex positive wife and we're going to go and we're going to fuck. And I don't know, maybe the kid will watch, who knows. But I'm just convinced that throughout this film, there are like rather unsubtle hints that Goose is indeed in love with Maverick. That's the only homoeroticism I take out of this film, is the fact that I think Goose is in love with Maverick. Until, of course, that he's dead.
Even to the point of sitting behind Maverick as much as he can.
100%. I mean, that's all part of it. It's all part of the mind games. But yeah, but he does get gypped in that. But the fact of the matter is, he's probably just not in as good shape as the other guy. Like Val Kilmer in this film. Like, God damn, man, that guy has the most beautiful mouth of all time.
Yeah.
It's so beautiful. Like, as a heterosexual male, I am comfortable admitting that he might have the most beautiful mouth of any sex of all time. It's really, I'm convinced that is the reason he got the role as Batman. Somebody literally just...
I'm having flashbacks to Willow, because didn't you say that during the Willow podcast as well?
Dude, it's honestly, I am convinced that somebody, like Joel Schumacher, was watching Top Gun, he paused it, and all he did was like, that hand thing where he just holds his hand above is like, that dude's Batman.
Yeah.
Because, what's the most important thing? You gotta have like either a good chin or you gotta have good lips. Like, Ben Affleck's got a famous chin. Michael Keaton looks surprisingly great, from the nose down. But then Val Kilmer, I mean, make no mistake, he is the most handsome of all the Batman. 100%.
How was Willow after this, mind?
I know, it's weird, right?
Yeah.
It's really weird. Although, I know this film was 80s, and I was a little bit surprised when I saw it was 86. I thought it might have been a little bit later. But when I watched it, I was like, man, this really does feel like a mid-80s film. But I think part of that might be the Tony Scott visual style, which always feels aggressive, even in his later films, even when you're talking about kind of Man on Fire, Domino, they've all got that same oversaturation, which I, because of him, associate with the mid-80s. Yeah. And he's one of those odd directors, because obviously he made an array of, great action films, famous director, but I've never been in love with any Tony Scott films. And I was like, just wondering, what is your relationship with Tony Scott as a director? Because if I go through his films here, like, this isn't all of this, isn't a definitive list, but I've got Man on Fire, Domino, The Fan, which I love, despite the fact that I think it might be objectively quite shit, Crimson Tide, The Last Boy Scout, one film we'll definitely end up doing on this podcast, True Romance, Beverly Hills Cop 2, and Days of Thunder. Now, there are some bangers in that collection, not to mention Top Gun itself, but I don't feel like I've ever been truly in love with a Tony Scott film.
So, spoiler alert, I really enjoyed Days of Thunder.
I think, I like Days of Thunder too, but I mean, it falls into the same category as the rest of it. Like, I think the closest he's got to it is maybe True Romance, but I think when people think of True Romance, most people still think of Quentin Tarantino because he wrote the script, rather than the director being Tony Scott.
True Romance is in my top 5. I absolutely love that film. I think it's fantastic. Days of Thunder I enjoy, even as a Tom Cruise film, and especially considering it's based on a driving sport where all you got to do is turn left. I mean, how can you fuck that up? But okay, that's
it's a weird, it's
an oversimplification of that sport.
It is though, but it's a tough sell. Like if you're not American or you're not from the Southern states, you're not kind of savvy to the sport, as it were. For most of us, like laymen's, you're just like, wait, you just drive in a circle and that's it. It's like, how do you make the movie exciting while fundamentally explain the technical proficiencies that mean, you've got to be great at so many things to go around in a circle perfectly. It's a tough sell.
But you're talking about his Tony Scott's visual style, his oversaturation, his aggressiveness. No more so, I would link this film to Deja Vu.
Yeah.
Fuck me, Deja Vu. When you look at the color scheme of Deja Vu, when you look at the aggressiveness of the camera, the way everything is laid out, because it's all like, it's meant to be in like flashbacks in time because you're looking through a computer screen. You think, fucking hell, that is insane, that film.
Yeah, it does make him something of a kind of visual auteur in the same way. Most people, when they think of like visual auteurs nowadays, they think of someone like Tim Burton, for instance. Like as soon as you turn on the TV, you're like, oh, that's a Tim Burton film. You don't need to be told. It's just got those kind of visual tropes. But I would say because of the way he shoots films, like the same is very much true for the most part of Tony Scott. Like I can turn on a film within like a few seconds, like that's a Tony Scott film, just because of the way it's shot, because of the camera angles used, but specifically because of that color saturation, which I find a bit much at times. But like you said, it's a weird one because I've listed off those films, I've seen all those films, I like all those movies, but I don't love any of them. And to come back to your point there where you said True Romance is a top 5 film for you. So as a big fan of it, when you think of True Romance, do you think of it as being a Quentin Tarantino film or a Tony Scott film?
So it's more the writing, obviously, when you look at that film. And I'm not a huge Quentin Tarantino fan.
Yeah.
Like I'm not, but you definitely tell. I mean, look, Dennis Hopper and Christopher Walken having that whole Italians are descendants of black people. Talk and things like that. That is Tarantino to an absolute T. But then when you have the Val Kilmer as Elvis, Christian, what the fuck is his name? Lead. Whoa. How did I forget his name as well?
Christian Slater.
Yeah.
Do you know, for some reason, and you say Christian, and the only thing that jumped in my head was Gleaming the Cube. I was like, Gleaming, his name isn't Christian Gleaming the Cube. It's Christian Slater, you dumbass.
Now, if we ever do a Christian Slater film, he is now Christian Gleaming the Cube.
Yeah, we'll have to go with that from now on.
But when you have that camera style, that is definitely Tony Scott all over. Gary Oldman swinging the lights towards Christian Slater, Christian Gleaming the Cube. That is Tony Scott. So yeah, when I watch that, it's mad because I have seen that film many, many times. I know it's a Tony Scott film, so I don't differentiate. When I first saw that film, because I saw that film a bit later in life than a lot of others. When I first saw that film, I did think, "Wow, this is a Tarantino." But again, to the point where a lot of people, we've already said it from Dusk Till Dawn, a lot of people thought that was a Tarantino film.
Yeah. No, I mean, I thought that myself. I think we mentioned the Dusk Till Dawn podcast, that up until I started doing the research for it, I was still convinced that Quentin Tarantino directed the first half of that film.
Yeah.
I thought they had legitimately Grindhouse style split the movie in two with Quentin Tarantino directing the first. He didn't at all. He just wrote the script. It was ridiculous. But these things get into your head. I think one of the most famous example is The Nightmare Before Christmas, another film we should really do on this podcast, certainly at Christmas, for instance, or Halloween. Well, Jesus Christ, that'll turn into a discussion right there. But for the longest time, and I still think to this day, most people are like, oh, that's a Tim Burton film. Tim Burton didn't direct that film, but everyone thinks he did because his name just became associated with it. And I think the same is true of True Romance. And it's odd because, like I said, I don't think I'd ever watched this movie back to the front. But my memory of it was just a Tom Cruise movie. Like I didn't even think about the director. I just thought of it, and I think that's maybe true of movies like nowadays in particular. It's just Tom Cruise sucks up all the air in the room. It just becomes a Tom Cruise.
But that's the same. When you get a star bigger than the director, I mean, Steven Spielberg will pretty much always be, oh, that's a Steven Spielberg film.
Yeah.
But if you look at like Tom Cruise, you're not going to link the director. You're going to go, oh, that's definitely that is a Tom Cruise film. It's the same with Will Smith. People go, that's a Will Smith film. Like Bad Boys, that's not a Michael Bay film. That's a Will Smith film. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think... Sorry.
I'm just saying, if your star power, and even in the 80s, Tom Cruise's star power, and I'm not going to deny it, was ever on the rise. Every film he did was better than the last film he did. People loved him. And he chose to do this film, which, to me, this film makes absolutely no sense. So much so, that if you were a female, right, would people singing at you terribly make you want to have a conversation with the guy?
I mean, it's a sign of kind of confidence, I suppose. But the thing is, when I was rewatching this film and I saw that opening sequence of him going up and singing to Charlie, and let's be clear, it goes very High School the musical very quickly, where everybody seems to be choreographed. Everyone knows exactly. It's like, oh well, this isn't Tom's first. This is Maverick's first rodeo. It's like we've all got his back. He's going to try and have sex with this one. We're all going to help again by all singing again. Quite bizarre. In and of itself, that scene is bananas. But halfway through this film, it feels completely in place because there have been 7 or 8 musical numbers by that point. Like I said, this film is so loosely tied to, like, there's just enough plot to get you to the next song, to get you to the next set piece. Yeah. But really, there's nothing to actually care about. In fact, the slowest part of this film is after Goose's death. Goose death. Sorry, can't speak. And obviously that's strange because we're kind of trying to we're forcing the idea that Maverick's feeling really bad about it, and obviously, he's lost his edge, despite the fact that it's clearly not his fault. And that's the weakest part of the film, when they try and add emotion to this film, because emotion has no place in this film. It was almost like for a split second there, they were like, listen, we should probably try and do a bit of plot, just a bit. It won't make much sense, but we'll try and kind of squeeze it in there. And the movie really slows down at that point, and it doesn't feel like a Top Gun movie. The rest of it is just songs and flying. That's it.
I'm so glad as well, though, you said about the dramatic change there. I'm so glad they didn't go down the trope of the spouse blaming the lead character for the death. Because easily Meg Ryan could have gone, well, it's your fault. He followed you. Because she did say he would have followed you anywhere. He loved you. But you led him down this path, blah, blah, blah. You killed him. You were the pilot. But they didn't. She knew for a fact it wasn't his fault. She knew that Pete, Maverick, he would do anything he could for Goose. You know what I mean? There's no way in hell he would have done anything to jeopardize Goose. I did love the fact that they didn't actually have that then. You killed him, dramatic turn. They always they seem to oversaturate in films like this.
Well, I guess they kind of put the emphasis, obviously, on the Charlie relationship because, God forbid, they didn't want too much plot in this movie. But the whole Charlie relationship I found quite weird because at some point she obviously leaves. Everything is turned up to 11, like everything else in this film. They make out like them getting together was bad or would be bad before immediately getting together and then immediately falling in love and then immediately having very blue sex. And I mean blue in the literal sense of the word. It is the bluest sex scene of all time.
But again, going back to the sweaty aspect of it, she won't kiss. He took a shower in her house, which I thought was weird.
Okay. He had to, though. He was so sweaty.
But that's it. He was sweaty.
Yeah.
He took a shower. Then he left. He's clean now. Nothing. He's at the gym. Gets into the lift. Okay, sweaty. Then they end up kissing because he's sweaty. I'm pretty sure when he came because he was sweaty as hell, she wanted to jump his bones. And then when he said he wanted to take a shower, he was like, "Oh, well, he's kind of ruining it for me now. He wants to be clean."
Jump his bones. I can assure you, I've never come back from football a sweaty mess, looked at my wife and thought, yeah, she wants to jump my bones. She's never wanted to jump my bones and I come back sweaty from football,
She wants to go at it. She wants to just keep giving it death.
She's like, no, just get in the shower, you dirty bastard. But yeah, well, like you said, the relationship with Charlie, although speaking of Charlie and things aging well in this film, her car, that I don't know why she owns a Porsche 356 Speedster, but she does, and it's fucking awesome. But she obviously leaves because it looks like things aren't going to work out for Maverick. So she fucking jumps town basically for a good spell of this film. The moment that he is a national hero, suddenly Charlie shows up again for that famous dick. What the fuck is that about at the end? She totally was like, this isn't going to work out. I've got to go. You've got to go. I've got to think about my career. As soon as she sees him on the front of the papers, she's like, I'm going back to San Diego and getting some of that Tom Cruise dick. It's an outrageous move at the end of the film. Outrageous.
So explain to me, right, Top Gun flight school. They're already fighter pilots.
I hope that's not a serious question because I don't have an answer for you.
they're already best of the best. But because the guy from... the one who lost his nerve at the beginning of the film, he was the one that killed Christine.
Yeah.
John something or other his name is in real life. He quit. So they go, we got to send you to Top Gun to flight school. So is Top Gun just teaching them dogfighting? But they already should know dogfighting because they're fighter pilots.
Yeah, I guess the idea is, it's taking the best and making them better. I mean, it's a bit odd because, again, you think there'd be a closer relationship with the instructors. And I quite like I think the casting's fantastic.
Cougar, that was his name.
Cougar, that's it, yeah. Viper, Tom Skerritt, I think he plays the role fantastically, and they do hint at a kind of relationship there, and he does immediately have that air you would want to impress him. But you've got, you're setting up this film, and you've got Michael Ironside, and you just don't use him hardly, which I find absolutely bonkers.
Although, but again, when you first saw Michael Ironside, did you think he was going to end up being a villain? Because I fucking did.
Oh, of course, yeah, you see Michael Ironside, you're like, oh, he's going to be a bad guy, but as we all know, there is no bad guy in this film, other than perhaps the Russians. But again, I think it speaks to this film that they've got the ingredients for all this stuff to work. You know, the fact that you do have the instructors and you could have this relationship, because I think bizarrely, when I watched this film and I was trying to kind of contextualize it, the closest I could come to is like a sports movie. You know, in the same way, and I know it's not a movie you like, but Whiplash is another one. I always make the argument that Whiplash, despite being a film about drumming, really is just a sports movie. The drumming is incidental. Like, he could just as easily be throwing a football, hitting a baseball. He just so happens to be drumming. But structurally speaking, it's a sports film. And this is maybe the closest thing to what Top Gun is. For, you know, they go to, you know, they're all forced together. You've got to work as a team. There's, you know, the big bad guys. But again, they're never really a bad guy in a sports film. It's just another team you're playing against. And that's ostensibly what the Russians are in this film. They're just the team that they're playing against in the end, because they're never sold as like this big bad. They're just the people that they're going to have to fight against at some point, in the same way that it would work in a sports movie. So yeah, structurally speaking, you know, it's got the kind of romance with, you know, the hot coach. It totally works like a sports movie. Yeah, instead of basketballs, there's fighter jets.
Sorry, it's the forbidden love. It's the love that they're not meant to have because she's his.
That trope, like, you know, you hit on her because you don't realize who she is, and then like first day in class, oh no, who was hitting on the teacher?
Yeah.
Tom, but yeah, like, I mean, you mentioned some of the cast members there. I totally forgot, like, Tim Robbins in this film. And Craig Sheff is in this film from Nightbreed, whose face I can never forget now. He just randomly pops up at the end of the film as part of the flight score. I can't remember seeing him in the rest of the film. And suddenly I'm looking at him like, that guy just looks like, what the hell is he from? Because, you know, I've only watched Nightbreed once, and I'm pretty sure that's the only thing I know him from. Yeah. Like, yeah, it's just got this like host of like memorable faces in this film. Although very few of whom are given any kind of genuine characterization.
We haven't given any love to, just after Goose dies, Tom Maverick goes back to flying, training, not the actual fight now, because Tim Robbins as Merlin is his PCO guy in the back during the actual fight. But you've then got a guy named Sundown who is in the back telling him we need to get in and all that, and Maverick confronts him after they land, and that's fucking Theo from Die Hard.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, and was he the one in the sequel? Like, because there was there is a Top Gun 2. It's like a comedic one, but it's called Back to Traffic School. Yeah, it's starring Sundown. Yeah, so he is the star of what is legitimately called Top Gun 2, and I did not know it existed. It's actually reviewed quite well. It's like 6.4 on IMDb. I know that's not amazing, but it's not bad.
2012. It's
but who would have thought that Top Gun 2 would end up starring Sundown of all the characters in this film? But
Maverick, Iceman, and Sundown go to traffic school.
Of course they do. Of course they do. God, the thing is, right? That sounds like a joke. That's like traffic school. It's like, oh my God, you've taken Top Gun and you've taken all the speed out of it, all the fun out of it, and you've turned it into traffic school. And the thing is, of course, that's supposed to be the point because this is a comedy. But they actually did that in real life when they made Speed 2. Like, you know, Speed 2 sounds like a joke. You know, it's like, oh, well, it's called Speed because the bus has to go 50 miles per hour, it has to go faster. What are we going to do out next? Well, like a jet fighter, something, you know, well, at least a plane, right? Something fast. We're going to do it on a cruise boat. A fucking cruise boat? It's like, is this a joke? No. This is the real script. Aren't they kind of, you know, slow? It's like, yeah, but, you know, it's in the water. People scared of the water. It's like, oh my God. I still can't believe that thing happened. Sorry. I'm very upset about Speed 2.
You saying about sequels and stuff and spin-offs and everything, right? I just found we have to, if we're going to do Top Gun and we're going to talk about Top Gun 2 Maverick, we might have to actually watch 2020's Top Gunner.
What the hell's Top Gunner?
It's an asylum film, one of the mockbusters.
Of course,
Top Gun Gopton? What the fuck is Gopton? Top Gun Maverick was due out in 2019, wasn't it?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
So they released Top Gunner in 2020.
Oh my God. I honestly, though, right, people must watch these films because they sell them at supermarkets. Yeah. Like, are people buying them by accident, or is it just like for kids who are like, oh, I want to see I know Transformers 8, but Transformers 8 isn't out yet, but GoBots 8 is out. So we'll watch that instead. Like, you know, there's obviously a market for it.
It's because the names are so close. So you've mentioned it to your, like your nan or your grandpa or something. You go, oh, I want to see. So they've gone to do their weekly shopping and go, oh, my grandson wanted to watch this film.
So you think that's where the market is?
I think it is, because instead of getting Transformers, they picked up Transmorphers.
See, that's a good one. I was trying to figure out whether people are buying it because they think, oh, it's fun, you know, kind of like watching, you know, B movies or something. Or it's just kids getting so excited, I can't watch that yet. But I love the idea that the vast majority of the market for these movies are just 80-year-old grandmothers who have accidentally disappointed their kids at Christmas when they've got GoBots 8 rather than Transformers. Ridiculous. But it might well be true.
I love those close names. Like you had Transformers, Transmorphers. What was the one with Aaron Eckhart? Battle LA?
Oh, Battle. Dude, there can't be a rip-off of Battle LA. Battle LA is surely too shit to have a rip-off.
There is a rip-off called Battlefield of Los Angeles.
It's combined it with Battlefield Earth. It's like an even worse movie.
I think it's Kel from Keenan and Kel. And my favorite one, Pacific Rim.
Yeah.
I think there's an Atlantic Rim.
Atlantic Rim Job, something along those lines. Who's making a mock-up of Battlefield? Sorry, what is it? The LA one?
Battle LA one, something like that. Battlefield LA.
No, see, I see you've messed my head up now. It's not Battlefield LA. I'm conflating movies now. See, I'm going to end up going out and buying these goddamn DVDs next.
Well, you are nearly 80, so
yeah. Well, there is that, of course. Jesus Christ! But of all the films to copy, I mean, Aaron Eckhart starring in Battlefield. It's not Battlefield LA. What have we done to ourselves? We were just saying it a minute ago. We're gonna have to
Battle Los Angeles.
Battle Los Angeles. Jesus Christ!
So what was
that film?
I gotta find out what the other one was now.
Dog shit. Absolute dog shit. I was so disappointed by that film. I don't know. Like, I remember being genuinely excited for that film. Like, I saw the trailer, like, it looks cool. I was like, oh man, this is going to be awesome. And it just turned into being a turd. But yeah, a lot of these films do end up disappointing. It wasn't very good at all. But yeah, we've got to get off Battlefield to LA and get back to Top Gun, I guess.
Well, you keep talking about Top Gun. I have to find out what the piss. Battle of Los Angeles, it was called.
Oh, of course, yeah, brilliant. Well, it's done a good enough job to confuse us. So, you know, give them their dues, I suppose. But yeah, it's hard, I guess, to sum up this film because, as I said, I don't think as a movie it actually works. I'm not convinced it's a very good movie in the traditional sense, but it's incredibly fun to watch because it is just they do, like I said, they do just enough to get you from point A to point B, to get you from one fun set piece to the next, one great song after the other. We've already mentioned the diner scene is bananas, not only because, you know, they want to have sex in front of their young infant son, but the fact that in the middle of a diner, in the middle of the day, they just, as a family, just all have a sing song in a fucking diner. If you imagine you were eating in there.
You've got no faces just looking, what the fuck are they doing?
Yeah, that's exactly what I'd be doing. What the fuck? Who's this guy? Like, just singing, and then all of a sudden his whole family like join in, and they all have a sing song. I mean, it epitomizes this movie. They were just like, listen, I like this song. We're going to get it into the film. Well, like in the background, it's like, no. This song is going to be in the movie. We're going to have our stars sing it.
Do you think think subconsciously there's something about the song he's singing as well? Because it's about, Jerry Lewis was a guy that married his underage cousin, wasn't he?
Well, as I said, there's some weird sex politics in this film, to say the least. I mean, it goes right through to the end where, you know, you have that moment where Iceman finally kind of recognizes Maverick's skills and they have a hug. And there's just that moment when you think, so sweaty. And you're like, oh, maybe they'll kiss. And then they hug. And you're like, well, that's maybe still kind of homoerotic. But when they hug with clenched fists. So, you know, it's masculine. You know, it's all good. So it's absolutely fine. But as I said, you know, at the end they land, but you don't really know what they've achieved. It's like they've scared off the minks from a boat. There's no sense of the scale. They kind of try and sell you on the idea that Maverick is now famous, but I'm not sure why. I don't really know what they've done.
Can I ask, what did the distance have to do with it? How far out are they now? 150 miles out? 100 miles out? 90 miles out? 90 miles out from what? What was the fucking distance?
Well, that's one of the problems with, you get it in video games as well. Like these flight simulators, like Ace Combat games, they all look amazing. but there's rarely any point of reference. So, of course, you've got these planes flying through the sky. They look great, but especially if you're shooting in camera in the 80s, it's hard to get a sense of, all right, well, where's the enemy? So I think that's all they're doing. They're like, oh, well, they're getting closer to the enemy. They're getting closer.
And because even when they're fighting the enemy, they're still saying 100 miles out, 150. From what? They're not 150 miles out from the enemy. What are they 150 miles out from?
Maybe it would be distance from the boat, maybe, because there's talk at the start of the film about the fact that they're almost out of fuel, stuff like that. But again, it's just not sold very well. Maybe I was just kind of lost on the kind of technical aspects of what was going on in the fight scene, because for the most part, I was trying to figure out why they were in a fight or why it was a big deal. And like I said, they land and it is a big deal, but I'm still not sure why. And I could say that of the entire movie. I'm like, a lot of things happened. I'm not sure why. I'm not sure if I really cared, but I really enjoyed it while I watched it. So that's absolutely fine, I suppose.
Every time he kept saying, I'm going to hit the brakes and they'll fly right by, which he said about 3 or 4 times.
Loads of times.
I was half expecting there to be a foot brake because I kept confusing it with fucking Hot Shots.
Of course. Well, it's bizarre because I kept thinking of Independence Day. And Will Smith just said, you can't bank at that speed. And then it's like, oh, he's dead. He's dead. But of course, it wouldn't be much of a film if Tom Cruise did that trick and got shot. But it did feel like Tom Cruise did that like 4 times. When we did, it's going to be a weird jump, Teen Wolf. When you go back and watch Teen Wolf, you realize that for some odd reason, they only shot about 7.5 minutes of actual basketball. So you see the same layup over and over again.
The same hook shot.
Yeah, the same hook shot. It's just the same thing. And I wonder if they've just got it in this. They've like, listen, we've got one really good shot of him kind of putting on the brakes. We're going to play that about 4 times because it's pretty cool.
Because you would have thought, especially in flight school, they're going, right, 6 times now Maverick has hit those brakes and flew right by us. Mm-hmm. Maybe we should know that this is his move. It's like his special move. He's reached power. He's now ready to hit A, B and do his special brake, fly right by you move. Like, they can defend against that now.
It's so bizarre. And this film is bizarre right through legitimately until the end credits, when you get all their faces and stuff. And it's like, that kind of classic.
Like Predator.
That's exactly what I thought. You have been watching Tom Cruise in Top Gun. The thing is, right, it's mental. This whole film's mental. It doesn't come close to matching the insanity, of course, of Predator. Because in Predator, all those guys have just been murdered brutally. And then they have them all like looking at the camera with big stupid grins on their face, like, hey, remember me? It's like, yeah, dude, you just had your spine ripped out by a predator. But you look pretty happy in the sequence at the end. Yeah, almost reminding you, it's like...
Except for Goose, they didn't show anyone that was dead, did they?
No, of course. Well, like at the end of a film nowadays, you get like community things like no animals were harmed in this movie. It's almost like they did that for the actors. Like, whoa, guys, the predator didn't actually kill the actors. They're absolutely fine. No worries. Don't escape. But yeah, like I said, I love the fact that they went that way for the credits. Of course, the credits have another great song. This film is bonkers from the opening sequence. And I know the opening sequence is just planes, is just them on the kind of the deck. But even that, like with the color saturation we've already mentioned, like right from the off, I was like, holy shit, this film looks bonkers. And then you go from, what is it, like 100 minutes? From start to finish, it's insane. And like I said, the only time they slow it down is for Tom Cruise to be a little bit sad after Goose dies. But even that doesn't really make any sense. And they sweep that under the rug so fucking quickly. He has a quick talk with Tom Skerritt as Viper. He's like, listen, maybe get over that. Sure. And he's off to the fucking races.
But that was it was like, get over it. Also, I flew with your dad.
Yeah.
Yeah, like the random, I flew with your dad. He flew away. He disappeared. It's fine.
Yeah, it's fine. That's another perfect example of a plot point being like totally underwritten. There is actually arguably a lot of plot in this film. Like there's the outline of loads of plot, like him and his father, his relationship with Goose, Goose's relationship with his wife, the whole thing with Iceman. You could do a whole thing on just the Russians, I suppose, but all of it is just swept under the rug for songs and dogfights, which is cool. It's 80s excess at its finest, and arguably not many directors do 80s excess better than Tony Scott. Like I said, I really love his films, but I like all of it. Even Domino. I'm a bounty hunter. I didn't hate that film.
Never seen Domino.
I mean, yes. Keira Knightley was arguably quite miscast. But again, the one thing, if you turn on Domino, immediately you'd be like, well, it's a fucking Tony Scott film. That's for damn sure. But yeah, by the way, if you haven't seen any of these films, don't pick Domino out of the list. Watch fucking The Last Boy Scout or True Romance or Beverly Hills Cop 2. It was a great film. Do not watch Domino.
Before we move on, this whole fly right by thing, right? Mm-hmm. Tower, can we do a flyby? No, the pattern is full. What pattern? Like, are they on about flight pattern? Because there's no other planes around them.
Yeah, but you forgot an important. His name is Maverick, Rob. His name is Maverick. He doesn't play by the rules.
Yeah,
and doing a flyby is not the rules.
Didn't he call him Knight Rider?
I don't know, mate. It's another one, like you said, like that bank sequence where once would have been enough.
Yeah.
Like where it's just like, I've just shown up at flight school. I'm a bit of a wild card. Oh God, a Maverick. Jeez, I'm doing it now. So he flies past. The guy spills his drink. The fact that they go back to it, they do it again, and he spills his drink again. I'm like, God damn it, guys, that feels forced.
I know. They're going down the well a bit too much there, aren't they?
They are.
The second point I wanted to raise is, shouldn't Bradley, the son, shouldn't he have had the dog tags? Why does Maverick get to have the dog tags and throw them into the ocean?
I think they knew their son was already fucked, basically. I mean, he's a weird kid. He's having to put up a lot with his parents, and now he's dead. I just don't think he's going to appreciate it. But no, jokes aside, I think that's a good point. I think it probably should have gone to his son rather than Maverick. But I think she probably knew deep down the heart that Goose was indeed in love with Maverick. Yeah. And Goose would have preferred that the dog tags went to him.
I just picture Maverick going to the morgue, just stealing them off the body and running away just
whatever it takes. Dog tags. Yeah. This is what Goose would have wanted. I mean, even I know he wanted to fuck me. Jesus Christ. Yeah. I think that settles that.
Yeah. Yeah, that'll do.
So on that bizarre note, we'll move on to Love and Hate. For Love, and surprisingly, we might have very similar things here. The soundtrack, absolute banger. The physical effects of age, fantastic. The stuff in the cockpit still looks a little bit dodgy, but for the most part, this film does look very good still. And Tom Cruise looking boss. As I said, the jeans, the white t-shirt, the aviators, like the hair. He doesn't look 80s. It just looks timeless. He just looks cool. Like his look in Top Gun will look just as badass in like 40 years from now, no doubt.
Well, I mean, his look is the same in Maverick, which is nearly 40 years from now. So yeah, I don't think it'll change.
Yeah, when they roll him out at 90 for Top Gun, it'll be Top Gun 4, I guess, officially by that point. It'll just be the same look again.
Yeah. For me, soundtrack. With the soundtrack, I'll add the theme, the score.
I love the theme. The
score is fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
I like Goose in this film. I think Goose is good. Goose is the he is the folly to Maverick. Mm-hmm. He just follows.
You need that. You couldn't have as much as I like Tom Cruise, his character is a bit much. So you need someone to take the edge off. You couldn't have just another character like him. So he is almost like the comedian. He's not overtly funny, but he just takes the edge off a bit. Yeah.
And to be fair, the aerial stunts in this film look great. They absolutely do look great. So they're my three. Cool.
In terms of hate, we've mentioned it a few times, the oversaturation of the color. I find it a bit too much. I mean, I know it is kind of his directorial style, his visual style, but I find it a bit much. The almost complete lack of narrative. I could just as easily put that in the love section, but it does make for a somewhat bizarro film. And Goose dying before he could tell Maverick how he really felt. That was a bit of a brutal one because he was clearly in love with him. But yeah, those are my three for hate.
So for me, the sweatiness of this film.
Yeah. Again, I feel like that could fall on either side of the fence. Like, I love how sweaty it's totally ridiculous.
Like,
but yes,
people were losing so many electrolytes in this film. I just imagine so much Lucozade being passed out.
Yeah, honestly, I think it is. We mentioned earlier about I think it was like Fast 5 or Fast 6. Like The Rock was famously sweaty in those films in particular. But in terms of every character being sweaty, it's like I think this is the new high watermark. No pun intended there. I just don't think any film has ever been this sweaty, and it's weird because I don't think it's ever mentioned. Like you said, I haven't seen this film for so long. I can't remember anyone mentioning how fucking sweaty this film is. And as soon as you put it on, you're like, what's with all the sweat? Like I know it's like San Diego, like it's in the sun, but Jesus Christ, sweaty boys.
So in regards to sweatiness as well, It's got to be James Tolkien chewing that cigar whilst dripping with sweat. Because I can imagine it just catching on the cigar, just going into his mouth. Like, what is he inhaling at that point? It's just, yeah.
Yeah, because
is he smoking a cigar? I know it's the 80s. Mm-hmm. Why is he smoking a cigar in a sealed, locked, top secret room? Everyone else must be going, dude, we can't see you. There's just a cloud of fucking smoke.
Yeah, it's a bit much. And like, right, as much as I like the occasional cigarette, there are a few things more disgusting in this world than the smell of somebody who's been smoking in the rain.
Yeah.
And I mean, ostensibly, he is smoking a cigar in the rain. Yes, it's raining from his face rather than the sky, but the smell in that room must be absolutely rotten.
Yes.
It adds that just sense of it just feeling uncomfortable. Like, it's already sweaty, and now you're getting covered with someone else's cigar smoke of all things. Oh, my fucking days. No wonder you want to, like, you would just be showering all the time. It's like, I can't get this goddamn smell off. I'm sweating all the time, and now there's this smoke. What the fuck?
Oh, mate, honestly. And finally, the insane lack of any plot in this film.
Yeah.
Like, I just tell me who the bad guys are. Although they did try that with Top Gun Maverick. There's no spoiler. Again,
no, it's fine. It's fine.
But they mentioned the whole reason for the mission in Top Gun Maverick is to take down the secret underground bunker, like Death Star style. Like literally Death Star style. They've got to go through the one exhaust port, right? But they mentioned the secret bunker of the unnamed nation about 50 times. It's not that fucking secret, dude.
Yeah.
You know
well, I mean, at least they're trying to add a bit of plot, because that is the thing with this film, is that the bad guys, the quote-unquote bad guys, literally never get mentioned.
Yeah.
They go as far as say they fly MiGs, so everyone's like, okay, it's the Russians. And they're like, well, you know, current circumstances, you get why we're fighting these guys. We won't add it to the plot. Off to the races. We'll just have more blue sex scenes instead. That's
fine. So that's it. So are we moving on to facts or?
Facts, yeah, I've only got a few. I got down here. I'm always, pinch of salt as always with these things, but it's like John Travolta was first choice for Maverick. I mean, that would have been interesting. When supposedly nobody wanted to be in it at first, and even Cruise initially turned it down. Even Val Kilmer didn't fancy it, but like Swayze, Emilio Estevez, Nick Cage, a bunch of others, all turned down this role. And it was only when Tony Scott got people like Val Kilmer in a room and convinced them, because I think, and we've mentioned it a few times here, you've got to remember what they were handed was a script. And what is not in that script is a plot. And a lot of the dialogue is dumb as fuck. So you need that visual storyteller to kind of storyboard it for you and say, no, this is going to be cool. It's going to be iconic. So I can well, it seems like a no-brainer now retrospectively. I bet back then when people were handing the scripts, like, dude, this is dumb as shit. But when you have that visual storytelling, we're like, no, this is what it's going to be. This is how iconic it's going to be. That's when you get the stars, and that's obviously what eventually happens. Because if nothing else, it's not the best film, but goddamn if it's not iconic.
Any more for you?
Oh, shit, yeah, I've got to keep talking. Take My Breath Away by Berlin was so effective that they added more romantic scenes, despite let's be clear, the chemistry between Cruise and McGillis, I'm not absolutely
I'm not buying that at all.
But in fairness, that song is a banger, so they're like, listen, we're going to need more romance. So there was even less plot initially, but a song forced some additional plot into this film. But even then, like, it's not just the lack of chemistry. The height was an issue. Like, I'm not trying to make fun here. It's like, he's 5'7", she's 5'10". And when you see some of the posters, like, she's kind of like bending over and stuff like that. Like, she does kind of tower above him. And we've already mentioned the Navy used this movie as a recruiting tool. And why wouldn't you? I'm sure it went down absolute gangbusters in the 80s.
I do love going on from that recruiting tool. Then they use this as a recruiting tool, but the real Top Gun school imposes a $5 fine to any staff member that quotes the film. So it got to the point where they were recruiting people now, but if anyone's in Top Gun flight school and they start quoting this film, like, I'll hit the brakes and they'll fly right by. When you land, you owe me $5.
I wonder if I'd get away with it, like at the top of this podcast, if I was quoting Meg Ryan. It's like, wait a minute, is that from Top Gun? It's like, if it is, he's going for a pretty deep cut there. If you're going out and you're in flight school and you go, I got the need for speed. You're like, yeah, no, that's not $5, that's $10. You're going to pay double for that one. But I reckon if I'm, quoting horny Meg Ryan, I might get away with it, dudes. So,
especially if you call it horny Meg Ryan.
Of course. Yeah. Well, she's a very horny girl.
Yeah. You also said about a bunch of the actors didn't want to be in it, like Val Kilmer stuff. To the point where he really did not want to be in this film. but he was forced by contractual obligations.
Awesome.
Yeah, like and to be fair, he didn't phone it in.
No, he didn't. I love that. Like, he was forced into it. It's like, every so often, like, slavery just gets the job done. It's like, it's like, well, slavery's bad, but like the pyramids, man, they're pretty impressive. It's the same with this. It's like, yeah, okay, yeah, he had to be in Top Gun, despite the fact he didn't want to be in it, but then he got to be Iceman. So, every so often the ball just rolls into that corner pocket by luck rather than judgment. But hey ho, it's the world we live in.
I wonder if Tom Cruise would ever admit this one now, because he's the adrenaline junkie he likes to say he is. But Goose was the only actor who didn't vomit while in the fighter jets.
Yeah, I read about that. Like, nowadays, there's no way he admits that, because he is Mr. Adrenaline. He's Mr. But he wouldn't have always been that. And the fact of the matter is, even if you want to do these stunts, your body still has to get used to it. Like, the fact is, there is no shame if someone takes you up in an F-14, starts like putting your body into like extreme G's, and then you puke. It's like, that is absolutely fine. That's what the body does. But the fact that, like you said, it kind of flies in the face of the image was sold in this film, because you see, like, he didn't even get to take his top off during the volleyball sequence because he wasn't quote unquote masculine enough. But he's the only one going up in the fighter jet like a boss and not puking. So reality versus the movie world, of course.
In a case of life imitating art as well, the art being Maverick's dad disappearing and stuff. A bit of sad news: stunt pilot Art Shaw was killed during the production of the movie. At age 54, he died when his camera plane failed to recover from a flat spin and plunged into the Pacific Ocean. Shaw's last words over the radio were, "I have a problem. I have a real problem." The exact cause of the crash was never determined, and neither the aircraft nor Shaw's body were ever recovered. Yeah.
That is horrible. Yeah. I hope you have a more cheerful fact after that one. We can't close out on that one.
Yeah. When Maverick is telling the story about being inverted and flipping the bird to the MiG, and Val Kilmer coughs bullshit.
Yeah.
Ad-lib by him. It wasn't even.
Oh, was it?
So I wonder if that's part of the contractual things as well. He thinks if he just acts a dick, they might kick him out of the film. Yeah,
well, it's weird because obviously Val Kilmer's like a bit of a weird one, because there is this kind of alternate universe where he was like the biggest movie star in the world, and he was in some massive films and really had that chance, I guess you would say, in like the mid-90s when he was Batman. He was in Heat and stuff, but obviously he was very difficult to work with, and clearly he didn't want to be in this film. I think he was one of those kind of like, I want to be an artist, but I also want to be popular or whatever kind of thing. But yeah, it's always a bit of an odd one with him, because you just think, man, he was so close to being maybe the biggest movie star in the world, but I think a combination of poor choices and reputation preceding him kind of impacted where he's going, because there was a few years there in the mid-90s where because what was the other one? He was the star of The Saint. Like, you feel like, maybe if The Saint had been a home run, but already, despite the fact that like Batman Forever was a massive hit, he was replaced, or he wasn't in Batman and Robin. Like, there's something going on there. There's no reason why anyone else would have been recast as Batman. Like, they
people found it tough. I think one of the biggest stories is The Island of Dr. Moreau. I mean, that was a nightmare for all angles from what I gather. But apparently there were times where Val Kilmer wouldn't even come out of his trailer. Or there's scenes where he's just yelling at the director, and they've replaced the director like 3 times. It's a bad film, apparently.
I think you get a few, and it's not just by chance that this actor is in that movie as well. But I think a lot of actors maybe around that kind of generation grew up with Marlon Brando and had this idea that they wanted to be the next Marlon Brando, or want to have that kind of career where, it's like, the art's first, and, I'm going to get what I want and stuff. And obviously the world had kind of moved on by that point. It's like, there's only so much people, it was still kind of hanging around in the 80s. There was that excess levels, and you hear about what people like Eddie Murphy at his peak or Sylvester Stallone could get away with when they were at their kind of most excessive, I suppose. But that was still a different thing from these, like this. I think Val Kilmer was, rather than the 80s concept of it, was more that kind of 50s, 60s movie star where I'm like, I'm an artist and I'm only going to do things my way, and I'm just going to be a big pain in the ass. And it just didn't fly, obviously. And maybe it was because, as good as Val Kilmer is, he's no Marlon Brando, which is no slight. Not many actors are Marlon Brando, but it is what it
is. No one had ever buzzed the tower at Miramar before. The Navy pilots who were flying the scenes for the film drew straws to see who would get to do it. It went to Lieutenant Commander Lloyd Bozo Abel, Michael Ironside just happened to be at the hangar that day, and the plane flew low enough that he could see into the cockpit as it flew by. He said it was one of the most spectacular things he'd ever seen.
Oh, I bet. Yeah. And that's one of the reasons, I can't wait to see Maverick. And this obviously kind of bleeds into Legacy, is the fact that you want to see these things, we're not on set kind of thing, but you want to feel like, oh, I can imagine them doing that they really did that. And it is that kind of visceral impact of something like that. And you have that with the first film, but obviously even more so, I'm assuming, with Maverick, despite the fact that I haven't seen it.
This one I love because this is, again, another reason why I don't like Tom Cruise, because he just won't, act. No, he does act. It's just everything is an act to him, even real life and things like this. But Tom Cruise had to wear lifts in his shoes with Kelly McGillis, because he's 5'7" and she's 5'10". So in order to not just be shorter than her on screen, you have to wear lifts. I mean,
there's a lot of examples. Like Sylvester Stallone spent most of his movie career ostensibly wearing heels. And, I think I shared that movie poster. It's like an alternative poster for this movie where they're standing together. And for the most part, and I mentioned...
Is he wearing yellow high heels in that poster?
That's what it looks like. And, I've mentioned throughout this podcast the fact that his look is completely iconic and timeless. And it is for the most part. But you look at that poster and you're like, wait, what's going on with his feet? And you can see the way McGinnis is standing. She's trying to kind of like hide her height. And he's standing in front of her. And he's got this weird posture thing going on, quite feminine in many respects. But I think I've had a really close look. I think they're cowboy boots with like a yellow tip. But what they look like are women's yellow high heels. And of course, because of the height difference, it just plays into that. It's a really bizarre poster. If you get the opportunity, check. Like I put it up on our Facebook page. I think we put it up on Twitter, whatever nonsense we're also included on. But those shoes are something else, quite bizarre.
And finally, there's so many we could go on for days with these. Because you've mentioned it quite a few times, the whole weird diner scene where it's they might be having random horrible sex. Meg Ryan and Anthony Edwards.
Horrible sex. I think you're the only one assuming they're bound to be having horrible sex. There's no way that Goose and Meg Ryan are having lovely sex. Just
the reason why I said horrible is because you've actually said that they're doing it in front of their kid.
In fairness, I did say that. Yeah, I'll give you that one. My bad.
Okay, that is horrible sex.
That is horrible sex. Yeah, I'll give you that.
Meg Ryan and Anthony Edwards became an item after filming concluded. Not sure for how long, but maybe they went to real life horrible sex. You never know.
Yeah, maybe. It's just weird with Anthony Edwards. I know he's Goose, but to me, he'll always be the doctor from ER.
Yeah.
I always just think of that.
Seeing him now, like his face is rounded out because he's quite slim. He's quite square jawed. His face is rounded out now. His bald head. He just does not look like Goose. You would not put Anthony Edwards next to him, next to a picture of Goose, and go, they're the same person.
Well, no, I think because he's always naturally looked more like a doctor than a fighter pilot. And of course, in this, to kind of make him stand out, they gave him a moustache and everything like that. Yeah. Although I find it really interesting in the sequel, because, I haven't seen the film, but I've seen the trailers, like how they've gone so far out of the way to try and make Miles Teller look like him. And I think it's because...
God-awful moustache.
Well, that's the thing, because he doesn't look like him. They've overcompensated. And they're like, we're going to make you dress and look like... nobody dresses and looks the same as, my dad had a moustache 40 years ago. I'm going to have a moustache. He wore Hawaiian shirts. I'm going to wear Hawaiian shirts. It's actually, when you think about it, really fucking bizarre. Although they're just we're going to try and make him look like he might be his son, I suppose.
You make that joke, right? That's how Miles Teller got hired.
Because he looked like his dad.
With Tom Cruise, right? So Tom Cruise wasn't sure on him. So they put a pencil moustache on Miles Teller.
Yeah,
gave it to Tom Cruise, and Tom Cruise said, that's Goose's son.
In fairness, though, that moustache does make all the difference. Because Miles Teller does have quite a long head. Like, again, he doesn't look just like him, but he like the moustache is enough. Put it that way. Yeah.
So let's bleed into Legacy, right? With Top Gun Maverick. Imagine having the star power of Tom Cruise. And yes, I have gone on record so many times saying I don't like him, right? But Scott Derrickson, I think it was Scott Derrickson who did Top Gun Maverick, the director. No, it wasn't Scott Derrickson. Sorry,
no, it's not. It's the guy who did. Is it not Kaczynski? Is it, or whatever his name is? We're not doing very well with names today, are we?
No, you think we should be prepared for all this shite, shouldn't you?
I know, of all the things not to write down. Yeah, it is Joseph Kaczynski. Sorry, I always get his second name slightly wrong. But yeah, he's the guy who did Tron Legacy and stuff. Again, he's like. And again, a movie that not everyone knows, but I love because on a visual level, that movie is absolutely gorgeous. in the same way that I think a lot of people are going to see Top Gun because it feels like a completely unique visual experience. Yes, Tron being the complete opposite end of the spectrum because it's all in a computer, both in a literal and a figurative sense. But so much of that film is just like, wow, it sounds and looks amazing. And that seems to be his kind of shtick.
Yeah. Well, Joseph Kosinski, right, he had maybe 20, 30 minutes, quick meeting at a dinner party, from what I heard, with Tom Cruise to tell him his idea for a sequel. And Tom Cruise was never, like, there was no mention of a Top Gun sequel ever. He has this meeting with Joseph Kosinski. Apparently then Tom Cruise gets on the phone. 30 minutes later, Top Gun Maverick is greenlit.
Well, that is
having
the thing,
that power of Tom Cruise ringing the studio. Paramount, is it? Just ringing them up and going, right, we're doing, this director's got an idea, we're doing Top Gun sequel. How the fuck does that happen?
Well, you can imagine you're the guy at Paramount though, waiting on that call. And he's just like, oh my God, it's like somebody's just handed you £1 million and just stuffed it into your pocket and you've had to do no work. Tom Cruise phones you up and says, oh yeah, that role, that the most iconic, probably, other than, you can make the argument that up until recently, I think it had become Ethan Hunt for Mission Impossible. But I think for the most part, his most iconic role, when people think of Tom Cruise, they still think of Maverick. They still think of him in the aviator glasses, in the coat and stuff. And now that this film has become his biggest film ever, unquestionably, like, that is the quintessential iconic Tom Cruise role, is Maverick. And I can't imagine what it was like to get that call. It's like, oh yeah, by the way, I'm going to do a Top Gun Legacy sequel 36 years after the original was released. And the guy on the other end of the call is like, that's exactly what you're going to do. That is fantastic news. It's like Spielberg phoning you up and just being like, oh, by the way, I've decided to make E.T. 2. Like, oh, thank God. We're going to make so much money. We're going to be so rich. Jesus Christ. I've answered absolutely nothing.
You say Top Gun's his most iconic role, not Cole Trickle from Days of Thunder, the worst fucking name ever.
That does feel like it was pulled directly from Talladega Nights, doesn't it? It's really bad. There's a reason. I don't know quite how well it did in America, but it is one of those, like, it was never going to fly over here. Like, no, not going to fly. I know, I appreciate it's a car rather than a plane. And they were ostensibly trying to just recreate Top Gun, but on the ground. But it's NASCAR racing. It was just never going to work over here because it's just not a thing. And it is legitimately not a thing. I think you can watch it on the deepest, darkest kind of channels of BT Sports once in a blue moon, but you can also find fucking drag racing in Nashville on BT if you're watching it at the right time. But there's never been a mention on the BBC website, or, you pull up the newspaper and it's like, I think the only name which has maybe traveled a little bit is Danica Patrick, because she was like the female driver for NASCAR. But other than, and even then, I think you could say Danica Patrick to 100 people out in the street in the UK, and 99 people would be like, who the fuck is Danica Patrick?
Because you think Danica Patrick to me, and for some reason I'm thinking of the woman from Wonder Years. Her name was Danica something, wasn't it?
Oh, the girl who played
Savage's Missus.
Yeah.
What was her name? It was Danica something, wasn't it?
I can't remember. I just remember I was watching her bizarrely in an episode of Impractical Jokers.
Yeah, where Murray had to interview her oiled up.
Yeah, and ask her all ridiculous questions, and she was like his big crush when he was younger. I was like, that is fucking brutal. That is absolutely brutal.
Her name? What is her name?
It wasn't like a weird...
Danica McKellar.
I'm trying to think of a character's name.
Oh, Winnie Cooper.
Winnie, that's it. I was like, it's kind of... I know she had a second name, but it was just Winnie for the most part, wasn't it? But she was pretty cool anyway. I had a bit of a crush on her when I was younger.
We have gone off on like several tangents on this fucking...
How have we got to the Wonder Years? Well, maybe that's a kind of like, a reminder that we should probably do The Wizard at some point. Is it The Wizard?
Oh my...
The video game one?
It's
that is one of those films where I'm genuinely terrified to go back to, because I'm like, there's no way that film's not going to be shit.
Mine is The Explorers with Ethan Hawke and River Phoenix.
I've not seen that, so God, that'll be an interesting experience. Like, I've seen the pictures, and I'm like, dude, this isn't going to hold out. Like, if you have zero nostalgia for that film, which I do, I just remember the name of the film, but I remember nothing about it. I'm like, it's just not going to work. That won't stop us doing a rewatch.
Turning a waltz, a seat from one of those waltz rides into a spaceship. It doesn't sell you.
I mean, Jesus Christ, we were legitimately just talking about how this podcast is getting off the rails, and so we were talking about the Explorers. Unbelievable. In terms of the legacy, we've already mentioned, well, Top Gun 2, Back to Traffic School, starring Sundown, and the more, probably famous Top Gun Maverick. I mean, I mentioned last week the importance of Top Gun Maverick to modern cinema. The fact that, I'd love to see a return to kind of movie star movies. I'm not sure if that's going to happen, but certainly practical effects and just a movie which isn't. I know this is still a sequel, albeit a legacy sequel 36 years later, but the fact that it's not a Marvel film, it's not based on, a modern franchise, like, oh, well, at least Top Gun's doing, it just feels like an old fashioned big budget movie, which I love. But yeah, obviously there was video games, mention the fact that it's probably Cruise's most iconic role, but yeah, it's a bizarre legacy because everyone just associated it with the 80s, and I think everyone thought, and you mentioned it just then, the fact that everyone assumed it was just going to be left in the 80s. Like Top Gun was just this thing in the past. It was Tom Cruise's role, and we all just every so often you'll pull out a dusty VHS. Who the fuck does that? And watch this film. But yeah, the fact that a sequel just came out of nowhere and it's become a monster hit it has. I mean, who the hell saw that coming? But it certainly speaks to the turnaround in Cruise's career, because it's easy to forget that around that couch jumping time, it looked like we might be done. It wasn't quite cancel culture back then. Like, he cancelled himself ostensibly by acting like a complete psycho. And I think a lot of people just thought, mate, he's not coming back from that. Like, there was a lot of baggage. But he's just kept knocking him out the park with his he's gone back to his bread and butter. There's not been many, curveballs. It's been pretty safe bets, but talk about doing them right. I mean, the only other franchise that comes close is maybe Fast and Furious, where somehow they keep getting better. I know Fast and Furious has kind of maybe arguably gone off the rails in like the 8th and the 9th film, but a movie series that peaks with the 5th film. Like, what other fucking movie series peaks at the 5th film? It's absolutely bananas.
I'll give you that caveat, because you said keep getting better, and I was about to bring up the fact that they drive a car in space in diving fucking suits.
No, they have, well, I was going to say jump the shark. They've gone to space, whatever you want to call it. I actually think they had that perfect balance. Like, even 4, I quite like, I think it was just called Fast and Furious, but Fast 5 through Fast 7 was when the alchemy was just right. The ingredients were just so, the salt levels were perfect. And now they've gone too far the other way, and it's kind of eating its own tail and getting ridiculous. And you wonder, is it going to happen with Mission Impossible? But at the moment, those films just keep getting better. You can make an argument that the last one was the best one.
Not a fan of them. Is the last
how are you a movie fan? Like, the fact that you like genre films, like you like action films like me. How can you not enjoy the last 3? In particular, I would say from 3 onwards, it's just lights out action cinema. There's no films which come close.
I'll give you 2 words:
Tom Cruise. Jesus Christ. Oh my God. We're going to end up doing a rewatch of 2017's like it's not Ghost Protocol, Mission Impossible Fallout, just to try and make you rewatch it.
The last one, the last Mission Impossible one, was that the one with Henry Cavill where he kind of reloads his arms?
Dude, that was one of the coolest things I've ever seen. I love Henry Cavill.
Yeah.
And that moment in the cinema, like I think the first time I ever saw it was in a trailer. I was like, did he just reload his arms? It's like, that's the fucking most awesome thing I've ever seen. And he's rocking the mustache, of course, that had a negative impact on, Justice League reshoots. Yeah. But in that movie in particular, and I love a fight scene in a bathroom. I love a good fight scene in a bathroom. Like, I think of that. I think of the opening of Casino Royale. Yeah. It's actually a really good one. I think it's in Terminator 3 of all films. Like, we mentioned that, obviously, when we did the Terminator podcast. Terminator 3 is not a great film. It's got some amazing set pieces. But yeah, it's worth watching just for Henry Cavill reloading his arms before a great bathroom fight.
Yeah, I'll give you that. That was a cool scene. And I mean, Henry Cavill is built like a brick shithouse anyway.
Oh, he's an absolute giant. I really hope he comes back as Superman. Anyway, Jesus Christ, we are going off the rails again. Yeah. To jump onto soundtrack, I mean, nobody's going to be surprised to hear that it sold 9 million copies. It was the #1 album when it was released. The score, you've already mentioned, was fantastic. But I think, for a lot of people, they remember Kenny Loggins, Danger Zone, Berlin, Take My Breath Away, Harold Faltermeyer doing the main theme. Any one of those would fundamentally take over any other film. The fact that they're all in the same film, and that's not to mention, a whole host of other songs which absolutely knock it out of the park in this film. But the one I know probably the most memorable for a lot of people will be Take My Breath Away by Berlin. But like yourself, the big one for me was the main theme. And a big part of that was because of the NES game. Like, when you put on the NES game, way back in the day, it played the main theme really well, which obviously doesn't sound like a big deal now. But back in like the late 80s for like an NES, when you put it on the game and it was like, Jesus Christ, that actually sounds like the main theme rather than just a bam, 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 you know.
The electronic music that they would have.
Yeah. It just suited a Nintendo really well. And the game itself, I'm in the video game section now, it's just happened naturally, I suppose. Although it did happen naturally until I mentioned it, and now it doesn't feel nearly as organic. But the Konami NES original, when I was younger, that was like a massive deal. Like the soundtrack was just embedded in my head because it was like the main theme as soon as you turned on the game. That game was so fucking hard, though. It was based on an arcade game. I think it was called Versus Top Gun in the arcade. But I think for the most people, they remember the NES original. And that game sold huge numbers. You know, every so often you'd have these licensed games for the original NES. Like the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles game was one of the biggest sellers. Top Gun didn't do those numbers, but it was a huge hit, even with people who didn't like Top Gun. Like I think a lot of people, they didn't watch the film, but they played the NES game, which was really bizarre. But even then, there was like the Konami version, which was the NES version. And then just like, and we've mentioned this with so many films like Batman 89, Bill and Ted and stuff like that. There was an array of Ocean developed versions or Ocean released versions. And they were all released for the UK computer systems like Atari and Commodore. And they're the ones we'll always remember from W.H. Smith's with the giant boxes. Yeah. And it was just bizarre, like a bizarre time in video game development that consoles had their version and then somebody completely different would develop and produce a video game based on the same movie, but a completely different game. So yeah, you do have this point in history where you have all these kind of like, well, you have that version and this version. Like I think they do it in like Retro Gaming Magazine. I'm not sure if you ever noticed it. They always sell it in like supermarkets. It's one of the kind of last remaining video game magazines. And they'll have like a history corner where they'll have, say, I saw one for Batman Returns. And there's like fucking 12 different versions of the same game. Like nowadays, you just get one version. Even if you have it on like the Nintendo Switch, it kind of just gets slightly downgraded, but it's fundamentally the same game. Back then, you would legitimately have like 13 different versions of the exact same game. Absolutely insane. But
what would you like to see if they remade the game?
I mean, it's very easy. They've almost got it because there are two fantastic flight games at the moment. There's the Ace Combat sequence. Ace Combat by Bandai Namco. I can't speak. Namco Bandai or Bandai Namco, whatever. That game is already, with its cheesy like storylines and stuff, basically like a Japanese version of Top Gun already. And they've got Top Gun DLC for that game, the most recent one. But of course, it's not the narrative. It's just the planes from the movie, which is kind of cool. But I really would like to see that development team at Bandai do Ace Combat, but to do a legitimate Top Gun game. You know, the full voice cast, get them all back, set it in the 80s, the full works. I think they've also done a DLC for Microsoft Flight Simulator. But again, that's just going to be the planes. Yeah. So yeah, we've got something close to what I would like already. But realistically, I just want the Ace Combat team to do a full-on Top Gun movie. That's basically it.
So
how about you?
We're kind of similar, but also different. Mm-hmm. I had Ace Combat in my head as well. But because I've questioned it so many times already, I kind of want it from the perspective of the bad guys.
Okay.
Just so we know that they're actual bad guys with a fucking story, with a reason why.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Do it from the Russians.
Why these MiGs have shown up. Or even for Top Gun Maverick. Why there's this secret military base. What are their plans? Like, why? Even if the end of the day, like the end of the game, then it switches back to Maverick and stuff. But no, I want it from the perspective of the MiGs, of the bad guys. I need that fucking story. I need to know what the bad guys are for a start. Yeah,
that'd be a good start. Yeah. I like the idea of having it basically just jumping back and forth, like or having two campaigns. One is the all-American Top Gun version, and the other one's the kind of slightly more dour Russian version from the 80s, you know, under communist rule. And to be honest, I mentioned all those. I cannot believe I didn't mention Afterburner, which is basic. I mean, I'm a massive Sega fan already, and Afterburner is nothing if not just an arcade Top Gun game. Yeah. And one of the most underappreciated and underplayed arcade games of recent time is Afterburner Climax, which was actually released for the Xbox 360 and PS3 in 2010. That game looks absolutely phenomenal. I mean, I don't think you need to change it. You could just change the name from Afterburner Climax to Top Gun, the arcade game, and it would 100% work. And it's such a shame that game's been delisted. The same with like Outrun 2, which is again one of my favorite arcade games of all time. You can't get anymore because Sega lost the license, the Ferrari license, and I assume it's the same with Afterburner. They've lost the license attached to the planes, so you just can't download it anymore. This game existed; it actually exists on my Xbox 360 because I bought it. If I turn on my Xbox 360, it's there. But you can't go into a store and you can't buy it. And you can't even buy a disc version because it was always digital, which is such a shame. So I just want to, basically, long story short, I just want something to re-release Afterburner Climax.
I'm glad you didn't call it Top Gun Climax, because that sounds like a different film, maybe starring Meg Ryan and Anthony Edwards again.
Or Tom Cruise having very blue sex with Charlie again. It could be either one of those, yeah. So yeah, you could have Top Gun, the very sexy version of it, where it's just loads of people having strange sex.
Top Gun Climax.
But anyway, in terms of scores and recommendations, it's an easy one for me. This is maybe the most 3-star movie of all time. And I don't mean that as a slight. We've talked about it before. You can have a disappointing 3-star film, or you can have a really effective 3-star film. This is the latter. It's a really enjoyable, really dumb 3-star movie that I would recommend to just about anyone.
Yeah, 3-star film. I would recommend it to people as well, on the caveat that don't watch it for Tom Cruise, because he's a dick. He is a dick. Like,
well, the thing is
just...
he is actually a bit more of a dick when he's younger. Like, that is one of the things. Like, when, if you watch this, and I recently watched what's the pool one with him and
not The Hustle. That's the
original one. Colour of Money. He's a bit of a dick in that as well. And obviously nowadays, because of what's happened, he's had to rein that in a bit. He can't be quite so, for lack of a better term, smarmy. Yeah. And he is in this film, and a lot of his earlier films, as good as he was quite smarmy. Same in Cocktail. Yeah. So you do have to get over that. That is a kind of bridge to cross, as it were. But
his biggest dickish film is got to be The Rain Man, or Rain Man.
Yeah, but that's different, though.
Piece of shit in that film.
He is, but I feel like that's a different kind of role, because he's supposed to be a bit of a dick. Whereas in Top Gun, say, use that as a counterpoint, he's not supposed to be a dick in that, but he just kind of is. And I think that's more like Tom Cruise's performance rather than the character. Whereas Rain Man, he's written on the page as a bellend. There's no twist. But I don't think anyone wrote Maverick as a bellend. They wrote him as, well, a Maverick, obviously. Yeah. But I think that kind of smiliness is very much part of Tom Cruise's early career performances. And yeah, I think that's still an issue for some. But I certainly wouldn't let you put I don't think it should put people off, but I would say that because I love Tom Cruise, unlike yourself. So yeah, in fairness, this is the closest we've come to meeting somewhere in the middle in regards to Tom Cruise with this film. So if nothing else, I feel like it's brought us closer as friends. So,
yeah, good. I'm glad.
A great reason to watch this film. Yeah. But yeah. So that's been Top Gun. So that was my choice. What's your choice for next week, sir?
Well, we're going to actually do Vin Diesel's best film, right?
Boiler Room.
Sorry?
Boiler Room.
All right, maybe his second best film.
Fast 5.
God, no.
No.
Right. So it's actually a request from the guy that does our artwork, Dari. Dari's really looking forward to seeing how we view this film. And it's on Netflix at the moment, so it's probably a good time for us to do, and it is Vin Diesel's best film, The Iron Giant.
Yeah, jokes aside, I mean, you could argue Fast 5 or I really like Boiler Room, but Iron Giant, like, spoiler alert, it is something of a masterpiece. And I feel like it was one of those kind of low-key masterpieces. I don't think it was released and everybody immediately went, oh, this is one of the finest animated movies of all time. But I think it's one of those where its reputation has grown organically. And I think a lot of people now, they go back and rewatch, like, wait, Jesus Christ, this is one of the best animated films of the last 30 years. And I'd be surprised if I go back, because I've not seen it for a while, admittedly. But I'll be amazed if this is anything other than a kind of, absolute classic. But another weird one. I don't think most people watch this and think, oh, that's a Vin Diesel performance. In the same way, I don't think people like, oh, Groot is Vin Diesel. Or what's the one from DC? The Shark. King Shark, is it? That's Sylvester Stallone, isn't it? Kind of thing. It was only the last time I watched it I really listened into it. I was like, oh, it really is Sylvester Stallone's voice. But yeah, I don't think most people, when they think of Iron Giant, think of it as being a Vin Diesel film. But yeah, totally is.
And Dari has asked us to cover this film. Dari produces some fantastic artwork for us. We can't. His artwork is awesome. I mean, look at the Top Gun one he's done now for the last Hey You Guys poster we had. But he's been fighting the cause for the Iron Giant, so I'm really keen to see what artwork he produces for this.
And Darry, this won't be the last of them. I promise you, we will do Excalibur at some point. We will get around to that.
Yeah.
So I bought the DVD. I'm ready to watch that film. I've never seen it before, but I bought that. And well, no, Weird Science was your choice, wasn't it? So we'll get around to Weird Science. I'm giving it away now. So yeah, in the next couple of months we are doing Excalibur and Weird Science. But first things first, the Iron Giant. So yeah, that'll be awesome. But as always, thanks for listening, guys. Do join us next week. And yeah, bye. I guess. Catch you there.
Yeah. Cheers, guys. Bye now.
Oh, and before we forget, here is Rob with all the finer details. Got to get through those, dude.
Yeah, so basically you can find us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at HeyYouGuys80s. We're also on email at HeyYouGuys80s@gmail.com. Please feel free to drop us any recommendations, any corrections or omissions we may have missed from any of the films that we've covered. Just get them in. And also, if you could, please leave us some 5-star reviews. That would really help us. And we'd like to thank, as always, Darry Fletcher at Darry Doodles for the fantastic artwork that we're now producing.
Cheers, Darry.
Thanks again for listening, and we will see you next week.
Cheers, bye.
Every time. Where's that fucking button?